And to be able to make progress on all of these fronts, you're going to need a very focused approach. Even though you're employing just a few tactics starting out in terms of, developing content for your website and then for your blog, for let's say sales assets or whatever it is, content marketing is kind of plugged into all of the areas of a business. So it's going to be useful no matter what you do. Building trust is incredibly important. I don't think I need to restate this, especially because when you're starting out, people buy from people, so people know they want to know if they can trust you, and those trust signals as important, such as talking about your expertise, talking about your product, and most of all, talking about how you can actually help people. And there is a second byproduct that kind of draws from this actually, which is differentiation, which is just as important. If you're obviously trying to stand out at a startup and you need all the help that you can get. So you can, create content that speaks specifically to your customers' needs and their problems, their desires, and so on. And making that content highly targeted will actually be a very good use of your time and limited resources, as any startup has. I kind of see myself as a translator between companies and their audiences, their partners, and their communities, especially because I work with a lot of companies that deal with some very abstract, let's say, sides of business. So when we're talking about, how it improves and builds relationships, we're talking about a few things. First, there's expectation setting. So through the content that you display on your website, on your blog, on any social media channel that you use, you're going to set expectations around what people can buy from you, what kind of, let's say, customer support they can expect to get, what kind of value and obviously benefits they're going to get from buying your product or subscribing to your service. So that's one thing. The other thing is that through content, you're going to empower people to make the right decisions for themselves. So you're supporting decision making. You're supporting this by, again, giving them information that's, authentic, that's true to your product's abilities at that point in time. And that basically kind of also educates the customer as to, what the best choice for themselves might be. And that comes from knowing your customer really, really well. Additionally, from this, there's also the side of customer development. So by creating content, by gathering the feedback that you get from Google Analytics or from other tools that you use to measure your impact, you're going to get to know your customers better. You're going to see what types of content they prefer. You're going to see what topics they prefer, what formats, which channels. And that tells you a lot about who your customer is and how they like to behave and how you can better serve them by figuring out, this match. So when you're building your company, when you're just starting out, you're going to have to tackle a lot of things. You're going to have to build internal processes, build your team, build your product, build channels, and so on. So you're going to have a lot on your hands. And to be able to make progress on all of these fronts, you're going to need a very focused approach. And what I mean by focused is, taking it one thing at a time and kind of validating those channels, those content formats, and what works for you and for your customers specifically. When you want to be this focused, obviously, you're going to have to do a lot of customer development, which means talking to your customers. And I know you've probably heard this so many times, but I cannot emphasize enough how important it is. There are all these frameworks and growth hacks and, all of these examples of things that have worked for other companies in other contexts. And even if you share the same industry or if you think you're targeting kind of the same customers, it's incredibly important to figure out what works for you and your customers. And the only way to find out that is to constantly talk to them, potential customers and existing customers alike. So you can get those two perspectives, find patterns in them, and then fuel your marketing decisions with that. So for a campaign, for example, by talking to them, you can find out where they hang out online, the people that they look up to for kind of validating their decisions, or the people that influence them in general and that they see as leaders that they respect and look up to generally. You might find out, for example, that they prefer to read local media instead of, let's say, international media. You're going to find out a lot of things and figure out how your product actually plays into their needs instead of trying to push a message towards them and wasting a lot of time, effort, and money. So being focused is essential. And this translates also to, for example, when you're starting out, don't set up accounts on all the social media channels and try to handle like 5 channels at once, because you're not going to be able to do that unless you have a dedicated person, which very few people do. Start by paying attention to your website, first of all, and make that at the best that it can be at that point. And also, like, choose one social media channel and stick with that. See if that works for your customers. If not, switch. But don't try to do it all at once, because you're going to get very frustrated and you're going to have a lot of projects that are unfinished. And that really adds pressure and also sometimes creates tension within the team. All of this obviously is fueled by customer development. So continue to iterate and think of your content also in terms of experiments, just like you do when you're building your product. Make assumptions, figure out the best way to test them, the best way to measure them, and then improve on what works. Start with something big, for example, making your website really good, and then break that website, the content on that website, into pieces that work on other channels. So you might take like snippets and repurpose them for LinkedIn, for example, or you might take like the topics that do really well on a website page and turn them into a series of articles or series of emails that might help your customers, figure out how your product works and how to best use it. There are tons of things that you can do, but starting from a central point and kind of breaking this central, let's say, this core asset into smaller pieces will ensure that you stay aligned and that you communicate consistently instead of trying a bunch of things and then trying to tie them all together and to align them. And it's a much, it involves a lot less hassle to do it this way. Try to think of your marketing strategy as, a multi-layered approach. Build it in layers. Don't think you have to start with something big and that you have to have it all figured out and do it like the big companies do it. You don't have to. Just start small and keep building and iterating on what works, just like you do with your product. And I promise you, it's going to be a much healthier way to approach it. That's going to feel a lot more rewarding, and it's going to get you closer to your customers than trying to emulate someone else's example. Just do it your way, and take what you need from other people's examples, but don't strive to copy them or to copy your competition, because that's probably not going to work for your particular case. Branding is a lot more than sometimes meets the eye. Branding specialists obviously know this, but startup founders may not. So I'd like to emphasize this. Branding is not just design or a logo. It's not just how you look. It's the entire, let's say, experience of your brand. And in the early stages, your brand is going to actually be you, because people buy from people. And when you have a small team, it's very important that you put yourself out there, that you associate your image with the company. So when you do your about page, for example, make sure that you put a picture of yourself and, of the other members of the team, link to your LinkedIn profile or Twitter or wherever you hang out, and just make yourself available. That's obviously going to build trust. Plus, it's going to slowly build the company's identity, because branding is that identity. It's the set of values and the way that you do things, what you believe in, what you stand for. That's actually your brand identity. So when you invest in all these things, you invest in things like, the content that you create, the types of campaigns that you run, the types of, let's say, events you get involved in. Everything that you do sends out signals about not just who you are, but how you actually walk the talk. And people are going to look at, especially at what you do. They're going to look at what you say and what you do, and they're going to compare those. And if there's a big difference between them, you're going to have an issue. And we can see that, with the companies that we interact in our daily lives. We see them when they're, they claim to be very environmentally focused, but then they're one of the biggest polluters in terms of plastic. So people are going to notice that difference, and that difference is going to stick with them. So try to stay aligned as much as possible. Investing in branding will also, again, I'm going to emphasize trust because that is so incredibly important. Branding is going to help you build that trust. And that trust will help you in ways such as, um, it will help your customers tolerate your flaws, because you're experimenting and you might fail sometimes and you might, not rise up to their expectations every single time. But if those people know for a fact that you're trying your best and that you're doing your very best, they're going to be, much more tolerant of these particular mishaps. Second of all, you're going to build that connection with your investor in branding. That connection, real connection between people that have the same interest and the same values and are basically kind of trying to help each other. So you're going to build support, community support, and have like a network of people that actually, want to see your company grow and they're rooting for you and they're supporting you actively. Plus, you're going to slowly build an identity that your customers resonate with. They're going to know, for example, when they interact with your company, that it's for them, that it speaks to their needs, and that you can actually, deliver actual help and actual solutions for their particular challenges and problems. And that must come across in a very clear way on your website, for example. Always start with the benefit. Always start with what people need and what their problems are, not what you're trying to tell them. This makes a world of difference, I promise.